Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. It is your favorite dark sorcerer here. And today I'd like to break down necromancy from what I've been studying and what I've been practicing over the better part of the last year. Okay. As of January of next year, it'll be exactly 1 year since I dedicated myself to necromancy full time. Not just within the study and practice, but also from a religious perspective. Okay. I'm talking from wide range, from Satanism dealing with demons and spirituality to necromantic practices and rites, from reanimation to conjuration, and most importantly, through the various different traditions of voodoo and witchcraft. And what does it, how do you break it down, basically? Going into various different terminologies and a wide range of stuff. It's been one hell of a hectic year, and, not just with the pandemic, which ironically does play into what this video is about. And it's a very good example of what necromancy is and what a necromancer does. Okay. And it's very funny because of the fact that when I first got into necromancy through Sumnus Dreadwood's books, specifically that of Chanel Whispers, that book really spoke to me. It literally caught my attention, and it kept my attention. Okay. Not just the left-hand path, the Black Scriptures, or that of, say, for an example, Profane Seals, or the Rites of the 13 Tongues. But this was something that I thought was very intriguing, especially when I started learning more about it. And I used to dabble in necromancy a little bit way back over 10 years ago, but I never really got into it on a full-time basis. I was so heavily influenced by Satanism and the various different traditions at that time that within witchcraft and other traditions of sorcery, it just kept my attention up until now. So I finally, over this last year, back in January, I dedicated myself to necromancy, and I really got serious within this art and this practice. And I think one of the things that helped my understanding from a medical perspective was that of the blood sorceress and necromancer Cagliostro, through her works, the Blood Sorcery Bible, Volume 1 and 2. Not just that of Forbidden Necromancy, the Forbidden Rites by from Lucifer Raphael, or that of Richard Keffer's books, Forbidden Rites, which was based off the Munich manuscripts. Okay. The experiments put forth in that last one, was something that went through grimoire systems. Now, this is something I've been aware of for a very long time through demonology and ceremonial, not just ritualistic type practices of shiromancy and wide ranges there. But when I got into the necromantic aspects on a professional and dedicated, committed path working over this year, it led me into so many different areas of practice that is mind-blowing. On one hand, you find out that in today's world, we have so many different laws against non-medical personnel. Like, say, if you haven't gone to medical school, you're not allowed to be around corpses. You're not allowed to be associated with, like, say, funeral homes and stuff like that outside of being a minister. You end up seeing the last rites, if you wish, of perdition. Okay, that of testimony of those who are dying that a minister tends to hear. You have the grave diggers, you have the funeral home directors, the embalmers, you have um, the coroners, you have those of the cremators, and you have those that do the autopsies on the anatomy of to find out the cause of death. Okay, to see how the medical community has been practicing necromancy for the past 300 years, going all the way back to the 16th century, was mind blowing. It was something that took me completely by surprise. You know, when we get into the Faustian deals, when we get into the Faustbach, we see where, or that of the tales of, say, the vampiric or the zombie. You get into the ghoul, you get into the revenant, the vampire, the lycanthrope, and the black dog, the hellhounds. You get into the wraith, you get into the Sadi, otherwise known as the Sith. You get into the various different elements of demonology compared to angelology. You get into the different, the three classifications of the Dralith, otherwise known as Elven. You get into the path workings of the gods, like, say, Belobog, the god of light, versus Chernobog, the black god, or if in ancient Greek you have Phosphoros versus Hespios, his brother, the day star versus the dark star. In today's religious perspectives, you have Jehovah versus Satan, or Michael versus Lucifer. So I mean, you're seeing the baneful and the beneficial types of sorcery here, but it's so much more than that when you get into the actual practice and study. And it's really exciting to see, because when you break it down, I mean, let's just take a look at a couple of terms here. Shiromancy. This is an old school terminology for divination. A lot of people classify it as being palm readers, palmistry, telling the ley lines on the hand through your development and stages within your life. But they don't go into the other aspects of divination, such as mediumship and spiritual conjurations and reanimations, such as the Witch of Endor, just as a prime example, which everybody seems to know about. Nobody really goes into the Russian classic and gets under Kakashi, the immortal necromancer, delving into, um, the House of Frankenstein, so to speak, where it said that necromancy was associated with grave robbing and criminal activity, which in the past, you could probably see coming, but especially during the 15th century, which was heavily influenced by, and the persecutions of those who performed sorcery, you know, in between the witch trials and the burning times, the witch craze. But when you get into the actual practice and how it relates to Christianity, you see the different powders, you see the different um, types of sorcery that they viewed as beneficial to baneful. Necromancy is considered to be the first and most blackest, the most darkest and feared of the seven forbidden arts, only to find out that there are actually 36 different types of Nancy's out there. So a lot of people are only aware of a small portion of these. And when you get into necromancy and you start learning the terminology, the definitions, and you start seeing the history and how it unfolds, you consider it several times throughout history. It has been closely resembling that of shamanism. You got. I apologize. That was my mother dinging in. My son is actually having grandma and grandpa time today out at Mimi and Aya's house. So she just texted me and letting me know that she just fed him. So, which is cool. So, anyways, that's something that's also, feeding yourself. That's something that actually does play a huge part into living and dying. But, and I'll get to that in just a second here. So, shiromancy plays into two categories: the conjuration of spirits. Okay. This is in the same mannerism as invocations and evocations, where you're summoning spirits to tell you or to reveal secrets of past, present, and future, or to help you to discern on certain topics or events happening in your life. Then you have what is known as reanimation, which Eliphas Levi spoke of. Not just him, but also Francis Barrett in his book, The Magus. Okay, Richard Cavendish actually spoke of the tales and the journey that Elvis Levi took through England and going right back into Hermeneutics and the Kabbalah system. Now, this is something that I found interesting as well, because when we look at reanimation, this is where the medical aspects really do kick in, because you're dealing with things like electrocution, the defibrillator. How did they do this? I mean, they used to do this with cold water, killing off the bad brain cells, to bringing on a extreme state of hypothermia, to drowning, which also created new problems, which was PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, to the 18th century insane asylums where they performed electrocutions all the way up into the mid 19th century, you know, and that was something that was very cool, kind of interesting to see, because the experiments of bringing the dead back to life from a spiritualist point of view, you're literally conjuring a spirit and channeling that spirit to come through either their body, their cadaver in general, or to a new cadaver. When we look at the term glick or lick or lichdom, or we look at the German, or Russian terminology of, say, for an example, the lick or the glick, glick being German, being translated into lick in Russian, or the more modern day cadaver, the dead body, really does play into an effect here, because you're bringing that spirit back into that corpse, that cadaver. So it's very interesting to see how the medical community actually made it all about them, and then you got the legal laws on top of that, the hysteria that took place, and then you got the religious perspective of condemning this tradition. But today we have access to technology. We have access to information that would otherwise be denied to us. Okay. Sorceress Cagliostro, for an example, defined the blood tapelets. I even, my better half, she's in college right now, and she was going for her MA, and one of the courses that she had to take was that of blood. Okay, you know, um, it's one of those ones where you have to draw the blood, you've got to store the blood, prepare the blood, study the blood, and this kind of just brought me back into Sorceress Cagliestro's work because of the fact that the way she put it is that you can use magnetics. Magnetics, that's right, magnetics. To once you've drawn the blood and you've frozen the blood, you can actually revive the blood at a later time to work with the blood. And because the blood is actually the conduit, is the key between the spiritual nexus and reality. It literally can be smeared on the black scrying mirror, the mirror of Lilith, and or any other divination tool such as the crystal ball, to or even in say a divination bowl, okay, so that you can peer into the spiritual nexus, the spiritual void, the spiritual world, and to commune with these spirits. So shiromancy plays into a wide range right here in this one topic, not just palmistry, not just psychic readings, not just mediumship in general, not just necromancy. And this actually goes all the way back into ancient Greek, which is Nicaea, because of the fact that just like the shamans, they have one foot in the grave and the other in the world. They're able to transcend both realms. It's like having the best of both worlds. They use anything from herbs to plants. Certain things like say hellebore, white Oriolander. Um, let's go with you know let's go with hemlock or some other variant of combinations like yarrow and stuff like that can be mixed together in controlled portions that will bring you close to death, but will also allow you to peer into that nexus, that next world in a more easier manner. I know a few practitioners that actually utilize shrooms. Now, personally, I don't recommend shrooms because I think it really gives off a false state of perspective. Okay, it's more of a hallucinogenic. But then again, when you get into Haitian Voodoo and you get into the zombie powder, you see where you're dealing with the texacodone, uh, type aspects of hallucinogenics. It's basically the poisons of numerous different species of pufferfish. You're dealing with the gases of toads, which are more of hallucinatory. You're dealing with the venoms of like tree frogs from the Amazons and stuff like that, and combined with other herbs and stuff, really puts you into a state of catatonic. And that's something that's very interesting because of the fact that they don't just kill you or make you appear to be dead by lowering your BP, your blood pressure, but also makes it appear that you are dead. So when they revive you, you as the victim turns out to believe that you have died and you've come back from the dead in a zombie-like state. So herbs and powders do play a huge factor in both shamanism and necromancy through shiromancy and divination, in general. But when you're dealing with the medical aspects, there's just so much that goes into it. Like thanatology, for an example. This is the study of death. Okay, when you look at the process of dying, like in the Thal's Tadal or Berdal, the Bordeaux, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, you're looking at the soul, you're looking at the body, you're looking at the consciousness, the mind, the process of the dying. but also what happens after death. Life is following death, and death is following life. The Ouroboros effect. Whereas in Egyptian Book of the Dead, it's literally showing you how the reanimation process can be established. And it's very exciting to see. So, thanatology, okay, what is it? Thanatology is the study of death in all its mannerisms, from becoming sick to, like, say, for example, have you ever watched somebody, what happens with somebody that has cancer? Okay. Cancer will eat you from the inside out. You can be a 6 foot man that's about 200 pounds. Okay. And certain types of cancer will eat you from the inside out. Not only will you end up getting this bad odor, you know, but it's like it's different types of cancer, and where that cancer is affects your body in various different ways. So if you have, like, say, lung cancer, it's affecting your respiratory system. If you have, say, throat or tongue cancer, it's going to affect your breathing, but also your speech. And a lot of people that get throat and tongue cancer are smokers. So keep that in mind. Okay. A friend of mine, he died at 74 years old. Okay. And back in 97, he was pronounced with a rare tumor of the large intestine. Okay. They removed a good portion of his large intestine. So you can imagine that because it's dealing with the digestive system, you having that much of a large intestine removed, if you gotta go, you gotta go. So a lot of times we had a porta potty in the van, or in the car, or we always stayed near someplace that had a restroom, because when he had to go, he really had to go. He would swerve right in front of a cruiser or an ambulance just to hit that restroom. But here's the thing. Over 10 years, I watched this man go from this active, intelligent guy to around probably about 90 pounds. 90 pounds. You're going from 200 pounds to 90 pounds. He couldn't get the nutrition that he needed because it went through him like Grant took Richmond. The doctors were so focused on that one region that they didn't realize that the cancer had spread to his liver, his stomach, and his lungs. He became erratic. You literally had to be like a shark and sleep with one eye open, because he would want to get up and walk on his own, knowing that if he stood up, he'd just go straight down. You literally had to help him walk that last month of his life. And trust me, when you've performed CPR on somebody with their eyes open, that's going to haunt you. That's going to do a lot of psychological damage to you. So I got a lot of respect for those that deal with death. I mean, I'm an ordained minister, so I deal with the dying. I normally hear about last rites, and I normally, I'm there to pray over people, as a universal minister, and then to counsel them, to, through grief counseling and stuff like that. But it's a whole nother ball game when you have to perform CPR on somebody that's dying or is mostly dead. Okay. And that last day of his life, if you've ever tried to pick somebody up, they're heavy as all hell. But when you got somebody that's mostly dead, they're light as a feather. Okay. Do you remember the Craft starring Robin Tooney? You know, um, that movie. You know, when they were doing that light as a feather thing and they lifted that girl up with just 2 fingers. They made the joke, "Oh, I sprained a finger." You know, yeah. Well, you can understand they're heavy, but yet when they're mostly dead, you can lift them up with one arm, just one arm. They're that light. Okay, so the study of death is not just about how somebody dies. It is the study within all aspects. I'm talking from illnesses. I'm talking from natural causes. I'm talking from diseases. I'm talking a wide range of causes because you are literally studying death, not just from a spiritual perspective, but from a physical. Necrology is the obituary notice, the listing of the deaths. Okay, and here we see where the notifications go out that somebody has perished, somebody has died from such and such a disease, or they were supported by such and such a people, stuff like this. But it also gives a list of how they died. Okay, how many of you pick up the paper and go to let's say for an example, the obituary section? Normally it's in section B or C, wherever the sports section is, wherever you are in the world, because every type of paper company is different. Here where I currently reside and have been residing for the last 10 years, um, they normally put it in section B, and it's normally near the end of section B. Because of the fact that it's getting between the local news and that of the sports section. So it's in that in between. But they also say how old they were when they died, when were they born, who were they, the obituary and how they lived, what kind of person they were, who supported them. Where is this funerary rite going to take place? Where's the funeral? Where are they going to be buried? Stuff like this. That's what necrology is. Okay. So again, this with thanatology really does play into a necromancer's perspective. So when we get into a religious sense, we go worldwide. In Buddhism, or let's say, for an example, in India, okay, you watch how people associate with those that pick up trash, okay? They avoid them like the plague. Those who deal with cadavers, those who deal with corpses, those who deal with death are considered dead. They're considered to be dead already, so therefore, people avoid them like the plague. You come here, let's go back into the 18th, 17th, 18th century, the wild, wild west aspect. The the gravekeeper, okay? This is somebody that fits a body for burial within a casket. Modern day, the modern day funeral home directors and those that the coroner's office that go and pick up the body and deliver it to a funeral home. All these people are considered vile. They're considered contaminated. They're considered evil because they deal and associate with death, but yet they do it in a legal perspective. Okay, so someone who's a practitioner of necromancy would consider be anticlimactic. It's more baneful, illegal, because you're not you don't have a doctorate that says that you are a legal medical professional. You apparently don't know what the hell you're doing, right? So you go back throughout history and you're going to see the various different influences necromancy has had. But necromancy really does go back into the old ancient world. I mean, you consider the cult of Anubis. The cult of Artemis, for example. Very, 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 very influential right there. You got the cult of, there was also followers of Ares, the god of war. You had the virgin sacrifices, and you had those in the royalty section of Europe that used poisons. And this is one of the reasons why we've got all these different things today where you got herbalists showing you this is what this does to the human body. You go underneath Google and you type in top 10 poisons of the world, you're going to get at least 3, 4 different classifications of various different types of poisons that affect the body in different ways. So to understand death, to be around death, you have various different sources and titles that go along with this. From coroner, medical courier, funeral home director, gravedigger, necromancer, and so forth. There is so much that plays into the effects of just what a necromancer is and does that is spectacular. I've got a lot of respect for this craft, this art. And over this last year, through my personalized studies, creating an altar of death and communing with spirits, going back into the old world through mythology and history. It's nothing like Satanism. It is nothing like demonolatry. Although you can utilize and associate with demons, you can work with the jinn. You can work with the reincarnate, as Sorceress Cagliostro so colorfully put it. You can even strengthen your own body through what is known as bloodletting, blood sorcery, and such. The art of black magic, going from Nicaea into Necromancy, the art of black magic, as the church recognizes it as. And then again back into the modern day Greek, which is necromancy. The world's definition and views of death and how people fear it. We don't fear death, we try to understand it. We try to commune with it, to become it, but more so, defy it if possible. I mean, look at Kinkashi. It was said that he removed his immortal heart so that nobody could pierce it. This is a Slavic deity, by the way. You can actually look him up on YouTube and Google. So many myths, so many legends, so many perspectives just on necromancy alone. I can see why this is one of the feared arts, the feared practices. Why the church and the mainstream JCI fears it and shuns it. I can see why they run away from it because they want to live. They don't want to become contaminated and be considered dead. When you think of this, you think of that Latin, verse. It says, what is it? Trying to think of it right offhand. Memore. Memore. Yeah. Remember that we must die so we have inspiration to live again. Very insightful. All these works, all these books, and we've only scratched the surface. Only scratched the surface. It's definitely humbling, but at the same time, It's mind-blowing. Why did the church call it the most feared of the seven forbidden practices? Well, I just listed some of them. And trust me, there is so much more. So much more. Spiritual practices to physical to ills, diseases, you name it. There's so much, so much. Different names, the different levels, the different viewpoints, perspectives, the legal perspectives. Like, for an example, to defile a corpse is illegal in the United States. Illegal in the United States. But yet, cannibalism is still legal in the United States. Found that quite humorous. Humorous. Cannibalism is legal, but yet defamation of a corpse is illegal. You see what I mean? There's just so much that goes into this practice and the viewpoints of this practice is you're dealing with the legal system, you're dealing with the medical, you're dealing with the governmental, you're dealing with the spiritual and religious, and it's magnificent to see. It really is magnificent to see, to learn about. And like I said, I've been doing this since January. I'm on the 11th month of practicing necromancy full time on what can be classified as a professional level. Okay. I'm by no means a professional in this tradition, but it's that perspective and view of this is what I'm doing. This is my life now. This is what I've become acquainted with, introduced to. This is what I'm living. And it all began with the Blood Sorcery Bible years ago. And then getting into Shall Now Whispers. Shall Now Whispers. That's old school magic right there, bub. That's all I got to say, ladies and gentlemen. Old school. So much old school. That is serious, dedicated information right there in that one book. You get into Lucifer Raphael's book, Necromancy, the Forbidden Rites, or the Forbidden Acts, or whatever it's called. I can't remember the offhand. And I can tell you that that's just the history of it. Getting into Patricia and Lionel's book, Demonolatry, and you're going to see, or was it Satanism and Demonolatry, I think. And you're going to go back hundreds of years, going all the way back into the Paleolithic era, going into the caves and understanding the different terminologies of death from how these cultures dealt with death. I'm talking from the masks, the wearing of masks, to the urns and vases that we use today, that they used all those centuries ago. Look at the Native American burial sites where they've consecrated and seed they've been viewed sacred and holy. How many times have they dug up one of these types of graves and they found these vases, these urns, these tools that they utilized? What about these cave paintings worldwide that were associated with demonolatry and death? You look at all these tribal views of, say, for example, let's go with Pazuzu, the Mesopotamian god of the Harbinger. It was said that he was the rival of Lamashtu and that he warded her off and kept her in check. Other stories and myths show that he is the king of locusts, the grasshopper, lord of the grasshopper, and he brings destruction upon on the fields of grains. Whereas others talk that he is a protector. And yet black magicians use him in curses and hexes through summonings and invocations or evocations, through hexcraft and cursing. You get into the various different ancient cults and beliefs. Like I said, the cult of Anubis, or that of the virgin sacrifices, just to benefit your community. You go to the ancient shamans or the ancient necromancers, such as the Witch of Endor, or the black or dark shamanism, where they utilize narcotics in some cases, natural herbs, going as far back as Genghis Khan, Hungarian and Siberian traditions. You look at the way we deal with our death and how we handle the dead with care and respect, but to actually see the anatomy of a person and what happens when you just simply shut down one aspect. A bullet to the brain would shut down the body completely. Modern day pulp culture would call that empty lung. You look at war and how they would use torture to cause severe pain, and a lot of times it would leave them either broken or dead. Like I said, electrocution, the masters of death, the arts of death. Freaking amazing. There's so much information. I highly recommend looking into this. I highly recommend delving into these traditions. Yeah, that's true. And there's a few grimoires that actually do speak to that, Tina. So, yes, there's a lot of things that go into necromancy and the associations with it, not just the Tibetan Book of the Dead or that of the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the cults of ancient worlds to occultism, witchcraft in general. I mean, when you look at the definition of the genetic makeup and how witchcraft is perceived, you see witchcraft, necromancy, divination, and possession. Those are the four main categories of what make up witchcraft in the church's eyes, not just the perspective of scholars or that of the populace. I mean, you Google what makes up witchcraft, you're going to see this. I mean, Robbins, for an example, in his dictionary, speaks to this. You got Rosemary and Gully that speaks to this. I mean, you got so many different authors that have literally tapped into this. But when it comes to death and dying and understanding the ills and the true weaknesses of the human condition, I'm actually thinking about going back and getting a doctorate back in school once my better half gets done with hers. She's already up to like 30 grand already. But I think by the time she gets done with hers, it's going to be around 50. Yeah, she'll be paying that off the rest of her life. If not, you know, our son. But, anyways, when you look at the prices and the views, you look at the practices, it taps into so much. Look into it, practice it. Get to know it. And don't be afraid to roll up your hands and get your sleeves dirty. It'll benefit you in the long run. All right? Have a good day.